So we're going to look at querySelector and querySelectorAll. First of all, why do we need these two functions? So let's understand that. Let's say I have a variable A whose value is 1. I have another variable B whose value is 2. And let's say I want to get their sum. Obviously, I would write something like this. I can print the sum in console log. I can also alert the sum. If I want to print that on the screen, I can use document.write C. That would give me 3 on the screen. Let me show you what I mean. My browser is also visible, right?
Yes, now it's visible.
However, what if I wanted to print this C, the sum, inside a heading, inside a specific HTML tag? That I cannot do using document.write. The function document.querySelector and document.querySelectorAll, first of all, they will be preceded by the word document always. Document here suggests that these functions work in the viewport, in your document. These functions have to do something with the document. So as I was saying, if I had to put this sum in a specific tag, I cannot do that using document.write. To write something on the screen or on the document, or to get something from the document, you need querySelector and querySelectorAll. Let us say I had an H1 in my HTML section, a blank H1. Since it's blank, you won't see anything on the page right away. In the JavaScript, I had two variables. I also had their sum. What I can do right now is document.querySelector. Now, document.querySelector, as you can see in the definition, returns the first element, that is the descendant node that matches selectors. In simple terms, document.querySelector will return the first element that matches what you write in the parentheses. I have written H1 in the parentheses, so this particular line would give me the first H1 tag, the first instance of H1 tag in my document, which is written on line 11. I want to print the sum inside this H1. For that, I would write something known as inner HTML. What does this inner HTML stand for? Inner HTML mean, this inner HTML mean whatever is written inside or whatever is written between the opening and the curly brace, the curly opening tag and the closing tag is known as the inner HTML. Whatever you would write or whatever is written in here, that is the inner HTML. Since by default, the inner HTML of this H1 tag is blank, so I'm telling JavaScript to fill the inner HTML of this H1 with the result of A plus B, that is C. So these 2-3 lines, what they would do is they would add A and B and print the result in H1. Now, if I go back to my browser, hit refresh, you would see 3 inside that H1. As you can see, it is bold. That means the 3 is being printed in the H1. The simplest of tasks, what document query selector can do. To go into further detail, why I did not use document write, I have written that. As it cannot print inside any specific tag, as was my requirement, I wanted to print inside H1, so I had to use document query selector. Now, when I showed you the definition, I told you that document query selector gives you the first element that matches. To put that into perspective, if I do something like this, and if I put it in console log. What this would give me, if I go back to my browser, you can see it is giving me the h1 tag. What if I had multiple h1 tags? What if I had multiple h1 tags? Then also, query selector will give me only the first h1. If I again go back to my browser and again hit refresh, you can see it is still giving me only the single h1, although I have multiple h1 tags. Document query selector always returns the first element that matches whatever you have inside parentheses. When I had a single h1, then also it was picking that. When I have multiple, then also query selector is picking only the first occurrence. Why I'm putting emphasis on this? Because this is the only difference between query selector and query selector all. Returns the first occurrence. Or you can also put it like this: document query selector returns a single HTML element. Query selector all, on the other hand, what if I wanted to pick all the h1 that were there in the page? Obviously, query selector will not be able to do that. That is the job of document query selector all. If you go by the definition, okay, there is no definition. Okay, no problem. Document query selector all, and if I go h1 in here and I write this inside console log, if you remember what was in here and what will be in here to show you the difference. I go back to my browser again. Query selector only gave me the first h1. Query selector all is giving me all the 3 h1 tags in the form of a list. For the sake of simplicity, we can for now say query selector all is giving me an array of the h1 tags, or to put it in more simple terms, it is simply giving me the collection of h1 tags. The question that is asked more often in interviews is the difference between query selector and query selector all, and what we can answer to that question is query selector returns a single HTML element, whereas query selector all returns a collection of all the matched elements. That is the only difference between query selector and query selector all. Are you getting the difference?
Yes.
All you have to remember right now is this thing: returns a single element, returns a collection of elements. Let us now move to some examples where we use, or how we use, query selector or query selector all. Let's say I have an input. And also I have a paragraph. Now I'm keeping things very simple. What I want is, I would want the user to type their name in the input tag. Okay, and we did not create a button. As soon as they write their name and hit this button, what I would want is, I would want their name to be printed in the paragraph. I would use query selector here twice. Once to pick up the value from the input tag. Second, to put that value in the paragraph. Both of these jobs will be done very efficiently by query selector. Let's see how we can do that. Now, what I said is, when user types their name and clicks this button. Okay, let's even make it even more simpler. For the time being, let us remove the input. Yeah, because that would require event. We have not studied events as of yet. So let me keep it even more simple. I have a paragraph which already has a name. Let's say your name. I want to pick this name from the HTML and I want it to be transferred or shifted to the H2 tab. Right now, if you go back to the browser, you can see the paragraph is populated with the name. The H2 is empty. What I want to do is I want to pick whatever name is there in the paragraph and put it in H2. This would again require me using querySelector on two stages. First, to pick the name. Second, to put the name. And I can do that like this. First, I would select the paragraph tag.
Okay.
However, I don't need the paragraph. I need what is written inside it. That, as we just studied, can be very easily obtained using inner HTML. This would give me the name written inside the paragraph tag because I have nothing to do with the paragraph itself. What we can do, we can store that in a variable just for the simplicity purposes. So now the variable name holds your name, this value. What I wanted then, I want to put this in the H2. So what I would write is, first I would have to select the H2, which I can do very easily using this. Again, just like I didn't need the paragraph tag, I don't need the H2. I need what's inside it.
Okay. Dot inner HTML is equal
Is equals to what? Yes.
is equals to P.
Not P. No, sorry. I have
name.
Name. Fantastic.
Okay.
How we can use practically inner querySelector and inner HTML. So what we have successfully done is, now next time when I go back to my browser, you would see the H2 also being populated. Right?
Yeah.
Okay, let's even take it even one step further. I wanted yes to get the name in the H2. I also wanted the paragraph to go empty. Right now I'm copying the name. What I want is to perform a cut operation. That is, take the name out of the paragraph and put it in the H2. Right now we are just copying, right?
Yeah.
That can also be very simply done using the document query selector P. I don't need the P. What I need is its content, inner HTML, and equate it to. Now this time I don't want the name. I want to remove the name from the paragraph, right?
Yeah.
I will simply do this. If I again go back to my browser and hit refresh, now what you would see is the opposite of what the HTML is. Now the P is empty and the H2 is populated.
Yeah.
What's the takeaway from this example is how we can use querySelector, how we can use it in our HTML. On line 26, we are using this statement, querySelector in inner HTML, as a getter, which is getting us something, right?
Yeah.
This line is getting us the value of paragraph or what is written inside the paragraph. We are using the same thing, querySelector and inner HTML, on line 28 as a setter. It is setting the value or modifying the value of H2. Here in a document querySelector in HTML is used as a getter. Here it is used as a setter. Again, a setter here. The takeaway from this is you can use inner HTML in two ways: to get something or to set or modify or to update something. Are you getting my point?
Yeah.
But now check how we would use querySelectorAll. Once again, I would take a pretty basic example for now. Let's say I had not one, but multiple paragraphs. And I wanted to have all the names written in all the paragraphs. Of course, if I would use querySelector, it would only give me the first name, that is Ram. Let's try that. If I go ahead, put it in a variable, and let's say console log it just for the sake of it. As you can guess, it would only give me name from the first paragraph, because query selector can only select single element, and it is doing that. Of course, you would say just use querySelectorAll instead of querySelector, and I'm going to do just that. Right? It must have crossed your mind. However, if I do something like this, or okay, we were doing it like this now, so let's do it like this. Names, we had an HTML in here only. This worked very well, although for the first paragraph, but it worked. It gave us Ram. Remember? However, this would give us nothing, not even the first name. Let us go into a browser and check. What is it you can see in the console? As you can see, we have undefined in the console. So we are not even getting the first name, although we hoped for all the four. Now, there is one thing that you need to understand and remember by heart when it comes to querySelectorAll. All the properties that we can very easily apply to querySelector, the property in our case is inner HTML. All the properties that we can very easily use with querySelector cannot be directly applied to querySelectorAll. What I am trying to say is, I will write it down because you have to remember it by heart. No property event, we will study just after this one. No property or event can be directly applied to the collection returned by querySelectorAll. As I mentioned a few minutes ago, querySelectorAll returns a collection, gives us a collection of elements. We cannot apply any property or event to that collection. This is something we have to remember when we are working with querySelectorAll. But if this is so, how we would get all the names from all the paragraphs, right? If you remember, in our last class, we studied loops. This is where loop will come to our rescue. If you remember, we studied for loop. What I'm doing is, I'm initializing a variable I from 0. That I'm setting the condition as till I less than 4. Why 4? Because I have 4 paragraphs.
Yeah.
And incrementing on each step. The problem with these two statements were, I was applying inner HTML directly on the collection of all the paragraph, all the p tags.
Yeah.
We cannot apply anything directly on collection. What we have to do then is, we cannot apply anything on collection. Yes. What I could have done is something like this. This 0 is known as indexing.
Yeah.
And what this implements is, what this implies is, from the collection of all the p tags, select the first occurrence of p. If you remember when I showed you what this thing gives. Let me open it again. Let me again show it to you. Can you see the browser?
Yeah.
It is giving us a list of all the p tags, and in that list, if you can see, the first p is denoted by 0, then 1 and 2 and so forth. So the 0 which I am writing in my code is this 0 only. That is the first paragraph.
Okay.
I cannot apply direct anything on the collection, but yes, I can apply inner HTML or any property on the individual tag. Yes, I can do that. So yes, I could have done something like this. Let's say console log only for the time being. I can do it, does not mean I have to do it. This is not the smart way of doing things. Although we had just 4 paragraphs for now. In a practical website, you might have like 20 to 30 paragraphs on a single page. That does not mean you will just keep on repeating yourself, right? That is why loops come in.
Okay.
So what I'm doing is something like this. Yes, this will not work as we have seen. However, this will. What I was doing on these 4 lines, I have done successfully with a single line of code. To show you what it is giving me, let me again go back to the browser, hit refresh. As you can see, we are getting all the 4 names. So the thing to take away from this is first this. We cannot apply anything directly on querySelectorAll. What we can do is this, but just because we can, we will not. So the way to work with querySelectorAll more often than not is with a loop. 9 out of 10 times when there is querySelectorAll, there will also be a loop. Are you getting my point?
Yeah.
Okay. I can make this program even more optimized. Right now I had 4 paragraphs, so I manually wrote 4 here. What if, let's say I increase 2 more paragraphs? Then this code of mine will fail if I do not change this 4 here. Let's say paragraph keep on adding after a certain amount of time. That means I would have to keep on changing this number here again and again and again. Of course, that would not be a optimized solution. I want something here that would automatically count how many paragraphs there are and will repeat the loops as many times. To do that, let me first take you to the browser again. Can you see this number 4?
Yeah.
Right now this will be 6, right?
Yeah.
What this is actually the length of this list. Length simply means the number of elements in this list. Since we have 6 paragraphs, the number would be 6. If I write something like this, I have removed the number, hard-coded number 6. What I am writing instead of that is this. Do you understand what I have done?
Now, the length I would be less than what exactly the P will.
You would see no difference in the output. I have not written anything different. What I have done is instead of hard coding, instead of manually writing the number 6, this would work, but this would fail if I, let's say, delete any paragraph, or let's say if I increase a paragraph. What I'm instead telling JavaScript is you count the number of paragraphs and iterate the loops, execute the loop that many times yourself. You do the hard work, not me. I will not count the paragraph and write the number here. So what I'm doing instead of number 6 is I'm telling JavaScript, you figure out the length of the paragraphs and iterate the loops as many times. If there are 6 paragraphs, the loop will run 6 times. If there are 60 paragraphs, the loop itself will execute 60 times. I don't have to do anything. As you can see, the answer is still the same. My code will still work if I, let's say, remove 2 paragraphs. Then also, My code is working just fine. This is how we write an optimal for loop, which includes query selector all.